Thanks for coming to this event. This is called Token Games, and we're going to talk about token systems. We're going to talk about cryptoeconomic systems, what we've seen working, what we've seen not working so well. And basically, if you're interested in designing your own token and figuring out where that might make sense, there might be some useful information for you here.
So at the end of this presentation, we'll probably be asking volunteers to come up on stage and talk a little bit about potential token designs or cryptoeconomics or ideas for projects that we can mull over. No pressure, just ask some questions. Basically a really short demo of what Wayne and I do in real time for the people that we work with.
Yep, so introductions. My name is Wayne Chang. I'm on the Token Foundry team. It's my job to hire really smart people and make them more successful than me and hopefully build out sustainable mini economies or make sure these projects that we're seeing in the space have a decent shot at long-term success. Because we feel that a lot of these projects could make a lot of industries a lot better. A lot of them start to resemble public utilities, and you can subsidize a lot of the costs that you need to start participating, growing businesses, serving customers in these industries, and really thinking about the how and the delivery and how this is sustainable is what we try to do at Token Foundry. So,
Hi, hold on.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm Kevin. I work at Token Foundry as well, and I do what Wayne does.
Great. So what is Token Foundry? So we help companies, again, have a best shot at long-term success, everything from cryptoeconomic design to figuring out how to get messaging correct, to figuring out strategies to start looking at compliance and what definitely not to do. We're not lawyers, though. We don't give legal advice. But we do know about how to figure out how to get some usage onto your networks in the right way. For example, many projects are just riddled with speculators, even though they claim that their tokens are actually used to do something, right? And if you have that claim that you have to use their token to do something, and you see a bunch of speculators and funds holding them and just sitting on it and doing nothing, then it's kind of self-defeating and it's actually really bad for the network, right? So what kind of systems can we build that are sustainable, involve some kind of cryptoeconomic protections, work in a decentralized fashion, and actually provide value to customers? Because that's what we look at in terms of trying to figure out sustainability for projects. Is there value being created for the customer? Is there surplus being generated? What's the split on that surplus? And what's your implementation plan? How are you going to roll it out, et cetera? So token design, we feel, and there are probably many definitions, but the one that we stuck with for now, it's starting with the real world problems, figuring out, is there a case for a token or incentive systems or smart contracts, et cetera? And really, it's all about the almighty problem you're solving. It can't just be, I want a token, let's figure out a way to shoehorn it into something. That's definitely not the right way that we think you should approach it. We feel that it's very multifaceted. Everything from an economic field known as market design, which has recently emerged, well-established startup practices such as customer development to really get to know your customers by talking to them instead of just assuming you know what they want. People like Steve Blank and Tim Brown have really thought about this space, and just like in any other industry, it's important to build products that people will use and provide value to them. Protocol architecture, so we have new challenges because scalability isn't really figured out on the blockchain just yet. We have a bunch of big data companies and people who think that if we use decentralized validation, it can make these services a lot better. But at 7 or 13 transactions per second, depending on what chain you're on, none of this is very feasible, right? And any computer scientists know that the blockchain is a really bad database if that's all you want to use it for, right? So you need to figure out how to scale that, what parts do you actually need on the chain, et cetera. And lastly, sales structuring. It's not so much that this space is really figured out and we try to tell people what to do, but there are definitely things that you shouldn't do if you're trying to have a fair sale. And we think that there are some really bad practices. In fact, the regulators are coming quite hard on when you promise appreciation, when you do things that really do make it a security, right? And that's that kind of behavior, trying to draw in speculators, trying to have massive valuations, way more than you could possibly need for something to deliver a product for a consumptive purpose, that's just, it gets very bad very quickly. A lot of scammers out there still. It's important to bring more legitimacy to the industry and figure out what's the real use case, what's the real business case, how do we provide value. So moving on. Oh, here we go. So market design is a subfield in economics. One of the pioneers, his name was Alvin Roth. He's still alive. And he was a Nobel laureate in 2012 for his work on kidney exchanges. He allowed people to get kidneys when they couldn't before using a computerized clearinghouse, using mathematics, using game theory, figuring out where the kinks were in the system, engineering a new market so that you could provide liquidity in this fashion, and it really helped people and make their lives better. And being able to build a new kind of market that enables new kinds of transactions and exchange that produce a surplus for everyone is a very, very interesting topic, and you can definitely measure how people are better off. So he came up with some pretty interesting principles, which I'll repeat to you, and it's very, very important to think about this in token designs, building these new ecosystems and economies, because most of these token-enabled economies or projects and with smart contracts, et cetera, seem to be subsidizing new forms of transaction and exchange by laying down a lot of the technology foundation you need and ways to allow commerce that couldn't exist before but then is mutually beneficial to the participants. So thickness is one really important point in market design. So no one wants to go to eBay if you go to a website and it's kind of like an empty shelf, right? Likewise, if there are no eyeballs there, then no one wants to post anything on eBay, right? You're promised liquidity for the items that you want to vend or the items that you wish to purchase. So thickness is very important to cultivate, so you have interesting activities to keep participants interested and coming back, and these nice forces working together to grow their market even stronger. However, if you have too much thickness, you can have congestion, and that's an issue. Congestion means that the participants in the marketplace don't have enough information to make a good decision. They're inundated with choices. They don't know the best way to filter and pick the best choice. So when you act on partial information, the result is often less efficient outcomes, meaning less surplus generated for that market. And market safety is the last important point, as it gives users confidence that they will get what they want. Whenever you have a convoluted interface or you have something where you require the user to game the system to effectively get what they ultimately want, right? Not only is that a horrible user interface, but also you reduce traction and the ability of the user to enjoy the benefits of the market. And as a result, they'll avoid your market entirely. Maybe you want to have a decentralized computing exchange, that's fine, but if it's more difficult to use than EC2, then no one's going to use it because no one sees the benefit, right? Because it's more difficult, it's probably costlier, et cetera. What are the unique benefits? So customer development is another important anchor of what we do, and basically, we take our clients through customer development, which is a well-established framework already, but it's one of the best ways to figure out what your assumptions are in terms of the problem you're trying to solve. The problem usually stays the same in business. You find new solutions as technology evolves, but that's the thing that it's really important to confirm that you're really reducing friction for someone, right? Like for delivery, a great example was given by Clayton Christensen that the problem of getting a parcel to somewhere else with high degrees of certainty is the problem, but the solutions keep changing. Throughout the years, you might have ships that King send, you might have DHL, you might have all these other solutions, and then FedEx. These solutions keep on changing as technology evolves, but if we focus on the problem, that's much more of a stable point that we can focus on to deliver great products. So the best way to do this is actually to go out and talk to the customers, the best way that I know of anyway. And there's just so much information pent up in actually talking to the people who have the demand, as opposed to making empty assumptions, thinking about how awesome this product will be, and finding out that there's no demand for it. As Mark Andreessen said, it's better to have a bad product in a great market than an amazing product in a horrible market, because the demand is really what's going to impact the success of your project. Protocol architecture, as I was talking about, so with scalability on the blockchain, it's a big issue. So it's really important to understand the unique value proposition of decentralized solutions. being able to solve collective action problems, understanding how you can get rid of siloed information and figure out how to make it open to the network, et cetera. There are a bunch of trade-offs that you need to make in service of that, but what's important to keep in mind is you have to keep your network goals set. That is, what's the problem that this market or network is trying to solve, work backwards from that, and then figure out what's the technology. Any distributed systems engineer will tell you that you can't have a fully consistent system all the time. You make trade-offs on consistency to get performance. You don't need a really robust transactional database at every step of the way. For example, a caching layer can be quite transient, and that's fine. So those are the trade-offs you have to make. That's the engineering part of it. Sales structuring. So this is really still an unknown territory. There are attempts at more responsible sales structures, but the days of a white paper and $60 million are way over. And we're really happy to see that because we want to see some real value start to grow into the ecosystem. So there are a lot of concerns here, and a lot of people are trying to apply traditional equities frameworks or securities frameworks to tokens and figuring out, oh, does the market cap mean something, or what supply should we have? These, I don't think there's a clear answer just yet, but what we've seen is that simple sales structures just tend to be better. Back to market safety, if participants don't know what you're doing under the hood with the sales structure, you have all these levers, right? It's difficult to understand. They don't participate because there's a good chance that it's not a fair deal. Even if you have the best intentions, if you make it very complex, there's probably something you didn't consider that could go wrong. So definitely a lot of points of difficulty, and it's better to have very simple structures. Cool, so that's a baseline of what we do and the general topics, and I'm happy to dive in more if there are questions after. But now I have some bonus content. So we consult with several clients. We've helped with, we looked at hundreds of white papers, and through many clients understood common themes that emerged and problems and frameworks that seemed to be relevant. So I figured I'd gather them up and share them with you in case you're interested. Cool, so platform economics and complementary goods seems to be a reemergent theme for Ethereum, for these blockchain projects, for Bitcoin, et cetera. So I have a hot dog here, and it's a great example of a complementary good because you have joint demand. When you want more hot dog wieners, then you also want more hot dog buns, right? And that's a good thing. From another perspective, the iPhone has complementary goods baked into it, that is the apps. So the economics of complementary goods means that if you have a complementary good and on the iPhone, you get all these apps for free or cheap, right? Each of these apps have their own demand curves, and because they're complementary goods, it nudges the demand curve of the iPhone further to the right, so more people, the iPhone is more desirable. Right? And this seems to be very relevant to what we're seeing with the Ethereum blockchain, with all the dApps being built on top of it, to these projects that are claiming to be able to solve collective action problems for all these industries. It's going to be very dependent on what kind of activity you can sustain on top of the platform, because that value is going to drive the demand curve for the overall platform, and this could be one reason why we expect winner-take-all specs in this industry. Okay, so as I touched on before, there's a security convenience trade-off. Again, this is pretty standard stuff in engineering and distributed systems. The CAP theorem is pretty well known, but basically, there was a bunch of debate about what chain is better, what's going to be awesome for my project, and of course, as with many things, the answer is it depends. But one interesting thing to realize is that you need to sacrifice consistency if you want to gain more performance. Unless you go and shrink the transistor and make a foundational breakthrough in technology, right? Computers can only clock so quickly, there's only so memory, it kind of has a fixed cost in a short time span, and we need to work with that. So if you want high throughput, thousands of transactions per second, right, then you really need to sacrifice that consistency and be able to tolerate partitioning or something to that matter. And there is an outline of, these different systems that claim different transaction speeds. Proof of work is a well-known one that's been tested. Proof of stake is susceptible to so-called a 51 attack, whereby an attacker could overtake the whole network if they were to get a majority and just rewrite history. And then you have Byzantine fault-tolerant systems, which you often see as BFT. A lot of the graph-like structures tend to employ this. And Byzantine fault tolerance means that you can only sustain up to a third of the nodes defecting or not behaving correctly before everything is lost, and you can't really make any guarantees about the network anymore. So as we give up this security in terms of our data and making sure that it perpetuates, right, we are able to gain the performance. So it really depends on what you need. Maybe if you're an IoT startup or something, for a single weather node, right? You probably don't need the same kind of security you need for a mortgage, and you can start to grade that accordingly. So one question that I still don't have an answer to, and I keep on asking my team, and we seem to be in agreement of this, but if you have different views, we'd love to hear it, because honestly, I'd love to hear other thoughts on this. But we're very concerned and confused when we see a bunch of payment tokens that as we read a white paper and they say that, oh yes, this is another medium of exchange currency, and that's all it does. You can pay for things with it on our network, but you can't use fiat or ether or anything like that. You have to use our currency, because if you're trying to create a new currency, right, currencies are good because there's a lot of it, and you can have really, really good liquidity. It's supposed to be widely held and tradable. Now, if you create a new one, then you enjoy none of those network effects, and you have to start from scratch, right? So it's not clear to me why that is a better thing. So that's one of the open questions. So another confusing point is a lot of people are trying to apply the equation from quantity theory of money to these token economies, figuring that, if we have high velocity, that has a certain implication for the market cap. But what's strange is that it's not a hot topic to care about how many US dollars are in circulation, right? So if we have a pure medium of exchange currency, why should we care about that as well? Maybe if we have asset-backed tokens or something different, the economics are different there. But for pure medium exchange currencies, it's a little confusing to me why the market cap is so important. Possibly it's only for speculation, I don't know. And but an interesting point around this, though, is that kind of giving credit to each of these projects could be mini economies, is that they seem to have their own fiscal and monetary policies baked in. For example, many token projects have to decide if they want a fixed supply or they want an inflationary characteristic for their token. A lot of projects have to decide if they need to collect transaction fees to sustain the network, right? And when you have fiscal policy, you're trying to decide what do we tax people and what do we spend it on after that. So it's kind of interesting how there are probably a lot of parallels for macroeconomics, but probably not directly applicable. It definitely needs specialization. So identifying valuable platforms. One of the best things I've read on being able to pick a platform that seems to be able to deliver value to people is from a book called Matchmakers by Evans and Shalmanese. And basically, they start with the same point we start with. What's the friction, how big is it, and who benefits from solving it, right? You have to start from the customer, you have to make sure that you're producing surplus, you're working backwards from solving a real pain point. I think that's at the heart of this, regardless of whatever you want to decentralize. Someone has to be made better off by your solution, or it's questionable if if there are no benefits to what you're doing, then what are you doing and for what purpose? Another important point is the ignition problem. So platforms typically have so-called cold start or ignition problems where you need to get that thickness we were talking about. You need to make sure there are enough participants in the market to make it interesting so you can start your positive feedback loops and grow to the point where you have a thriving economy, a great engine, and just be sustainable. And lastly, it's really important to think about playing nicely with others, and this isn't just kumbaya, but really it's one interesting example is the medieval kings would host festivals and invite all the merchants, and they would get to collect a tax on the things that the merchants would exchange. And if you were a wise leader, it would behoove you to set fair rules, not over-collect on the tax, and make sure that people are adequately protected to and fro your kingdom so that you can attract massive amounts of participants, right? You need to make rules that everyone likes so they come and join your market. Otherwise, they don't leave. Back to the market safety point. So how do you bootstrap this kind of ecosystem? Well, a platform or an n-sided market, whatever you prefer, right? Like a shopping mall is a good example. A shopping mall is a thriving two-sided market of these shoppers coming in to access goods and services and the vendors who come and go. And we've all seen dead malls before probably. Unfortunately, I didn't sneak a picture of one in, not that I enjoy that kind of stuff, but these things happen to be kind of, they really kick off or they just die. And in order to start a shopping mall, you really want your anchor tenants, like a Nordstrom, a Kohl's, or something like that, because these are the big pieces in your ecosystem that will start to draw the demand and foot traffic. And you find in this model, the smaller stores start falling in line because they want access to that demand, and it gets even more demand. So there are many strategies to figure out how to cold start your system. A lot of them involve like figuring out, how do we capture the demand from different sides of the market? What proportions do they need to interact with each other so that you have that useful activity we were talking about? Of course, yeah. So basically, one theory that's been emerging, I'm kind of a fan of this, is that you see a new pattern of specialization in trade with the promise of a lot of these technologies. And I say that because it's unfortunate that we have to wait so long for these things to play out, because I would love to see some things that I can measure the surplus and see value delivered to customers. That's what I'm always looking out for. It's very frustrating that it's hard to see that, and one of the biggest cases might be CryptoKitties. So like, that's just the reality of it. I feel that I'm an optimistic person because I think there's incredible potential in unlocking a lot of this, but there's just a lot of work to do to actually start seeing this. But this could be one of the models that delivers. If we see a common base protocol layer, as we've seen with open source software, it's almost like a public good, non-rival and non-excludable. It means that, non-rival means that if I'm using it, you can also use it. At the same time, that's not an issue. It's not like a bottle of water where if I drink it, then you can't anymore. It's more like a song on Spotify where we can both be listening to it at the same time. But non-excludable means that it's not a club good. You can't tell people to bugger off because I don't want you to access this stuff, right? And what comes to mind is running a node, for example, on the Ethereum blockchain. Anyone can do it. You just federate into the network, right? And these are very interesting because you can provide value to society by building that base layer. The base layer to what exactly? Well, maybe you could build a base layer or a platform layer to different industries, accounting or content distribution. If you build the foundational building blocks, right, not just dead code that sits there and you can download to your machine and it does save you work, but if you have these living, breathing systems with active participants, live resources that you can pull on when you need, right, then you subsidize a lot of that cost. Much like how AWS does. Why do people move from dedicated servers to AWS? Well, you move the fixed cost to the operational costs, and you don't need to spend $1 million to buy like a data center to do your internet company anymore. You pay $5 a month on Amazon, you grow from there, right? So if you can provide that kind of liquidity of services, from this common protocol that kind of looks like a public utility, there's a case that you can be even more competitive and provide more value to customers by building specialized services that live on top of that. It reminds me a bit of the QuickBooks, how they have apps on top. You can buy the apps, but what if the apps captured most of the value? And what if you could make really, really good profits on that, right? This could be a good thing for society, maybe. Let's see. Okay, so another interesting idea, and then I think we're almost on the last slides. We'll move to the next event. So basically, it's one thing that has come on up and up again about these with client work and solving liquidity problems, figuring out what systems are sustainable is there are different kinds of exchange, and from the left to right, we go from less efficient to more efficient. And when I say efficient, I mean that when people want to make a deal in a market and everyone's better off if they make that deal, the deal actually happens. right? And this can be prevented by a load of things. Maybe, I want to sell this clicker because I think it's very valuable. I've never seen such a convenient advice for advancing slides, right? And I think that it's like a very, I don't want to give it away. I think that you think it's really valuable, right? So I might decide not to sell it to you, even though I would take a lower price for it, right? That trade would have made us both better off if I just gave a decent price for it, parted with it, and created surplus. But that transaction couldn't happen, right, means that there's less efficiency. So what's interesting about this is that when you see exchanges and lots of stuff going around, a lot of makers and takers and buyers and sellers, typically you find that things have most of the information encapsulated in the price. For example, in the Chicago Board of Trade, where they grade these different commodities, right, that you can know that you have a certain grade of a bushel of corn really just lets you have all that information in the price. Whereas if you go to a bilateral agreement, kind of like a relationship or hiring an employee or something more bespoke, there's information that's not captured in the price because it's not convenient to do so, right? So these tend to be less efficient. And there's even a proof that when we have working exchanges, and of course there are assumptions with all these proofs and they do things to make things computable and stuff like that, but there's a proof that when exchanges are working in an ecosystem, then basically all the bilateral agreements move to the exchanges automatically. And the proof goes a little like this. Basically, if you have so-called weak sellers and weak buyers on a platform and they're getting taken advantage of, they don't know how much they're worth. Think of a young engineer at a tech company. Then basically, through bilateral agreements, the stronger players who have a stronger negotiating position can take advantage of them. But if you have a working exchange structure where people know they can go here to get a fair market price, then the weak buyers and sellers start to defect to the exchange structure. And as a result, the strong buyers and sellers don't have anyone to take advantage of and really want to move themselves because that's where the liquidity is now. So of course there are stipulations and assumptions in this model, but it's one thing to consider. And the last point I'll make is one really great book on this is Machine Platform Crowd by Rajolfson. And crowdsourcing is a very popular paradigm in a lot of these models, right? When does it work? When does it not work? I think he has some of the clearest thinking on this in that you need openness, non-credentialism, verifiability, and so-called geeky leadership, meaning that if you allow broad participation, supposedly the diversity can come in and help you solve problems that you haven't been efficient at solving. You need verifiability. If you can't check the work of someone submitting code or something, then it's very difficult to maintain high quality standards. But code is a great example, and so is Wikipedia, because you have references and people can review code in the open. It's pretty convenient to do so. And lastly, he noticed that the leaders tend to be involved themselves. For example, Jimmy Wales of Wikipedia edited articles for the longest time, and Linus Torvalds of Linux kernel had an active involvement in sort of writing it. Well, he wrote the thing at first and still looks at the code, etc. So this level of involvement and dedication is important.
Okay, so we have about 20 minutes left on the clock. But now what I would like to do is take these principles that Wayne has talked about and try to do them in real time. So if anyone has a project that they would like to mull over token design with, please feel free to come up and join us. And then we will basically do a really compressed version of what we do with our clients for you on stage, improvised. So do we have any volunteers? All right, yeah. Yeah. Come up. Do you have another mic for, okay, yeah, you want to use this mic? Okay.
I can use this one, sure.
Okay. Would you like to give us a short little introduction, your name, your project, and what you're working on?
Sure. Can you guys hear me? I know I'm, cool. My name is Michael Callahan. I run marketing for Mom Life. It's a social platform that's using blockchain to monetize the body of online attention, content, and data for young women and mothers worldwide.
Okay.
We are monetizing this directly with brands. Thank you. Oh, cool. All right. Yeah. 7 years of engineering school, couldn't figure out how to do that. Thank you very much. We're monetizing all of this activity directly online with brands. So if you imagine every time that you are online, you see an advertisement, your data is paid for. Obviously, we've all seen this situation with Cambridge Analytica, but you're not actually making any of that money. We've created an ecosystem where young women and mothers are the owners of all of their online attention and paid directly with our token for what they do.
Okay. Any thoughts?
Paid directly for what they do.
With the payment tokens.
Well, so I mean, like it kind of depends on this. Like, so what you're saying is, we have the idea of mining rewards for a Bitcoin or Ethereum or something, right?
Sure.
And what if we were to instead incentivize useful activity, right, to mine the block, so to speak, something with a common goal? Who would be paying into the system? Why would I want to join this as a mother or daughter?
So we have already built a social platform that has just over 1.2 million users right now and the highest engagement of any social platform in the world, bar none. And the reason is that this audience specifically has a unique need for shared experiences, shared wisdom, to talk with other people who are going through the same hopes and fears and pain and joy that they are. It's really a unique experience to that audience, independent of any other online audience. And that is, so the reason, that's one side of the equation. The reason that you would want to pay in as a brand is, although young women and mothers worldwide are the single most economically challenged demographic, they're also, interestingly, the most in demand for consumer goods. So anyone selling anything from diapers to baby formula, this is the audience that they want. They are already advertising on our platform, but now instead of accepting fiat currency and us getting paid, we are making our users, these young mothers, direct stakeholders in the success of the system, which, I guess, not to preempt a question I'm sort of imagining you're going to ask me, but which is the reason that we're not using Ethereum or something like that. Because we make these young women and mothers are the owners of their own economy that we are creating the infrastructure for.
So the question I would ask is, what does the token do to change how the platform operates in a way that wouldn't exist without the token?
So obviously most of our audience is already buying diapers, baby formula, everything else. But the vast majority of our audience also struggles economically. We pay them directly for what they are doing online every time, or on our app. Every time they see an advertisement, they have ownership over whether or not their data is shared with some of these brands. If they choose to do so, data sovereignty, user ownership are core principles of the product we're trying to create. So they are making our token in this process, and then can spend that token on the kinds of products they're already buying within Mom Life platform. Again, that diapers, baby formula.
Okay. So in essence, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they use the token to purchase these goods that go into a data set, and then they get those tokens back whenever brands or companies purchase that data from the set?
It's not as sort of black and white step by step as you're making it. It's completely cyclical already existing. So if I can use the example of Steemit, Steemit's model exists entirely because of an incentive structure. We have both a reward system for what our users are already doing, creating content, inviting users to the app, as well as an incentive system on top of that to do the kind of things that make us money and grow the value of the currency.
I like that you have 1.2 million users, right? We were talking about market thickness. That's a great way to seed it.
Sure.
And it's a necessary part. Can you talk about the engagement and how they're active, and how would you imagine them interacting with your system once you have a chain?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we're most proud of is from the ground up, we designed a system that is that facilitates, again, these immediate interactions of oh my God, my baby is kicking. How does this feel? I mean, as a man, as a single man without any children, I will say personally that there are things I would never have imagined can be issues that women feel the need to talk to each other about, share experiences about. I mean, I can get into the technical details, but this is the theory around which we've built a very high-walled garden that men, such as myself even, and everyone else are very strictly kept out of.
So who's talking to the customers and figuring out what their needs really are? How does that process work for you?
So by the customers, do you mean our brand partners?
Your brand partners and the women on your site. It sounds like both of them are your customers.
Sure. So yeah, different ends of the same equation. So we've already built a network of over 100 brand partners that I'm sure you've heard of: Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, Huggies, Nestle, all of these guys who are advertising on our system. They are basically paying in the same to advertise and buy data, but now they're going to be paying into an economy that works for the users and is not just sort of an extension of the exploitative online ecosystem that we're all so used to.
So I want to say a few points, which is that off the bat, I can't imagine a system of payments that wouldn't work in a similar way with maybe something like a stable coin, like a DAI, where the payment is denominated by a currency that the brands and customers are already accustomed to using and spending. And so I feel like adding that extra layer of payment in a new currency is going to add a lot of complexities to a system that doesn't necessarily need it. But I do also think that there is a use and there is room for a token, because you have this very exclusive community with specific rights or features or things about how those community members might want to engage with each other. So off the top of my head, while I don't think that payments are necessarily the right things, I think one thing that we can explore is how we can use something like a token to engage potentially in a community or a forum or participate with other people to talk about goods, maybe to make reviews, to do certain things that extend just outside the realm of payments in such a way that the people who have that token and perform actions on the network can help make it a higher quality network in other ways.
You're absolutely right. And quite honestly, I tried to condense the use cases too much. That's actually a use case that we're very much working on currently. And even beyond that, intra-app entrepreneurship and P2P commerce as well. Using the example of India, in the last 10 years, almost 80% of new entrepreneurship in India have been young women and mothers. This has been an incredibly disadvantaged audience worldwide, and as soon as, give this audience an inch, and they will take a mile. So giving them the platform is...
That could be conflation, though. Like how women and mothers, are in Southeast Asia, for example, could be very different than how they are here. And I'm not going to claim to understand that demographic, so I want to be quite reserved in what I say.
What do you mean?
Huh?
What do you mean?
Well, I just said I'm not versed in that demographic, but from the understanding I have, for example, I know in many African nations, the women have a far different role than we expect in the Western parts of the world, right? I'm just saying that when it's very dangerous to make an assumption in another country and saying, hey, it's going to work here.
I would say that's unfair.
Why?
Because I think that he would have basically, he already has a target market with users that already exist on the platform, and you already have an idea about how they might potentially behave. So to say that, if you expand and you run into all of these problems, I think that's, I would say, like putting the cart before the horse.
I'd say that it really depends on what value additionally you can deliver to them and how much they reflect upon that, right? So what is the unique value proposition you get from shifting in this way, and what makes you think that that's something they actually want?
We don't consider it a shift, we consider it an expansion. It's one use case of many. We know that it's quite honestly something that we're still in the process of developing, not something that we've currently implemented. We've been told by members of our current ecosystem and by people outside that there is a demand for this, but we're not going to make that assumption, quite honestly. we've heard this is something we want, and we can create that for you, but our system is successful even if that is not.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. I think that's all the time we have. We have 10 more minutes, so we want to do one more. Can you say what your name is and what your project is for everyone?
Sure, absolutely. Again, my name is Michael Callahan. I'm running marketing for Mom.life, and we're looking for more funding, obviously, during our pre-sale, as well as potential partners that we can work with in the areas of charity and mom-focused product distribution for our clients. So,
thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
One thing that we might mention about like just pre-sales in general, not saying that like they should be banned or anything, but if you have steep bonus structures, maybe really reconsider your sales structure if you're not planning to issue a security. Because if you have a steep bonus, right, and then you intend for that to hit an exchange or something and provide massive inflow or whatever, you gave people discounts, like buying at a discount, kind of like an expectation of profits. We don't do bonuses at all. We can open up for questions if you'd like.
If anyone else has a project they'd like to talk about, yeah? Yeah, of course, absolutely. Come on up. I'll give you the mic.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Jethro Jones, and this is an idea that I've been kicking around. I'd like to vet it with you guys.
Okay.
So it's something I would call CareCoin, and the issue that I would like to solve is that a good portion of the world doesn't have access to health insurance or quality health care.
Okay.
And I was wondering how you would create a platform that allows individuals to create ad hoc health insurance networks. So like, let's say a doctor, an individual.
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point. I don't think it would be in the United States right away.
Right. So yeah, so for just as an exercise, let's ignore the regulatory issues because
that's very difficult for me to do.
Right.
But
so let's start maybe talking about the developing world or places where because the regulatory hurdles would be huge, obviously, and maybe insurmountable. So just from a pure platform and thinking in terms of human interaction and the game theory involved, how would you create a platform that would allow ad hoc, spontaneous health insurance?
Well, that's the thing. Like, I feel that yes, you can have kind of your agent modeling, your utility functions, etc. But I feel that especially in emerging markets, like the culture and the specific norms of each locality have a huge impact on adoption. And
I guess one thing that I would like to know first is more specifically, when you say these health insurance networks, what are they trying to provide? Are they different sets of insurance like offerings, or is it one offering for like how?
So ideally, it would be up to the person starting the network, and so there wouldn't be any predetermined set of rules. That the platform could be open-ended enough that I could create, whatever rules that I would want within that framework. As far as individuals, what would be covered? Is it catastrophic only? Is it that type of thing? I mean, maybe that's the place to start, but just allowing something to facilitate this.
Okay. I just thought of an idea. If you want to go down that path, potentially you could have decentralized insurance plans where people get certain aspects of their insurance backed by people who want to be involved with that. So for example, if I have a holistic health insurance plan, of like a copay and all this stuff and then catastrophic, people can potentially come in and only cover the catastrophic aspect of this plan for a specific user base and have all these different insurance companies come in and fill out different segments of the same plan. That might be one way to start bootstrapping a network where you have this open-ended system, people come in and participate, and then the different service providers can work together to build.
So I think that's a decent model in the general form, but like I think especially when you go into healthcare, right? Like you again, you it's like death by nuances. Like a lot of the small things matter a lot in healthcare. And like you might claim that, oh yes, the participants know what's best for them, but it's looking at preventative care. Some people would argue otherwise. And again, depends on the jurisdiction. Are people even used to buying health insurance or health care? Do they see value in it or not? Are there other existing social structures they depend on? So I think like trying to create a generalized healthcare solution is kind of very, very difficult. I think it's much more productive if we want to take this route to pick a particular locality and actually understand the market there, making it the first so-called beachhead and seeing what other aspects you can expand to.
Let's pick a locality and like which one would we start with, for example?
No, I'm not going to pick because I don't understand them well enough.
Okay,
I think it's important to draw the lines of your own ignorance before blindly dashing in with your techno solution.
Fair point. Okay.
But like the model in general, though, I like it quite a lot. So basically, like the idea of having decentralized underwriters, create some kind of new instruments and finding a supplier market to competitively, go for those instruments, be it health insurance or be it loans, etc. Like I think that could solve something in the financial services industry. I think there could be a market for that if you solve information asymmetries by having a price structure. I think, and one of the previous speakers was talking about it, but Hayek's work in the use of knowledge in society, the whole thesis there was that the price serves as information. It serves as the user interface, so you know what is going around in the economy without actually having to have this omniscient understanding of it. Yeah, okay, so before diving way into that, we're definitely a little short on time.
Fair enough, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's all the time we have for today. So thank you very much for coming.